Hi, I'm Chris Crystal, and these are my thoughts on the market. And these are both long term thoughts, short term, so it's strategic and momentum. This is not meant to be investment advice for your portfolio, nor should it be considered such. So I wish you the best of luck. Thank you. I think what's important to understand at this point is it's been a very difficult year. Of course, everybody knows this. We've seen a lot going on with COVID and the restrictions, et cetera. But we're now at the phase of vaccinations, and so we started the year in Europe with new negotiations ongoing with China, and this was on trade and having a fair and open market and more accessible for European companies, and really in the way that China would act towards Europe, and with trade at 1.4 billion euros per day in terms of what's going through on the trade. This was a vital component for the world's economy and for European economy as well as Chinese economy. When you have the three quote unquote largest economies, if China is not already the largest, or if they're only the shadow economy being second largest, but they are certainly moved up into the top spot of negotiations. So Europe and China are negotiating together, and old conventions regarding the International Labor Organization Convention and treatment are in sharp discussion now. We've seen some effects on that on European companies, and how China is responding to it, and whether Europe will actually stick to its guns. But as ESG, and G being the governance component, and S being the social, and E for the environment, we'll see how much Europe actually sticks to its guns, and or trade negotiations. But remember, economics is warfare, and currently the warfare is being won by China. So if we move back towards the trade issues, trade between China and Europe should get better. Trade between the United States and Europe still needs to be resolved. There are still some tariffs in place from the previous administration, where tariffs were put up to 25% by Europe in retaliation to tariffs that they had received. And those tariffs are primarily in place. However, some were not raised, but some others were, like Harley Davidson's now at a 50% tariff to sell the motorcycles here in Europe. However, whiskey, which Europeans value more than motorcycles, is only at 25% and did not see an increase. So that's why I carry Kentucky bourbon in the bag in the small little 5 centiliter bottles for golf partners when they hit a birdie. However, what's more important is the negotiations between China and Europe, and you have seen a blowback towards companies like Hennes and Moritz, where they were against some of the cotton that was being used and the conditions. So this will be for further development. But we do have conventions in place, and we'll, of course, move at the speed of bureaucracy, which may mean a 2 year discussion. But in terms of the environment, where the target is 2030 for the emissions and lowered emissions rate, and making the planet a very safe place to live, or safer place to live in terms of health, which is affected negatively by higher carbon CO2 levels in the atmosphere, and also methane, and a number of other pollutants. Europe is moving forward and now has a U.S. administration which will work with it. Old friends are reunited. John Kerry working with Europe, and you see this coming about hand in hand. And this was one of the key focuses for the EU Council on this meeting this week. And when you look at it, though, there are further developments that have to come, both internally in Europe and as well as in the U.S. But let's focus on Europe, because there will be grid developments that need to come. There is a reliance upon energy, or energy source, that has been legacy, i.e., gas or coal, and of course oil. But as discussed, big oil is getting more and more involved in the environmental side and producing renewables. We also have the alternative sides, such as biogas, which still needs to be cleaned up. in terms of the scrubbers and what they're putting into the atmosphere in terms of ash and the components to that ash. However, the goals to reduce CO2 and methane are they bode well for the European consumer. And what is very interesting though is the turn to renewables, and the renewables, the key renewables are of course windmills, which are, in my opinion, environmentally destructive to a micro ecosystem in terms of what they're doing to the bird life, and in terms of the ground level that you have to tear up, and then develop transmission lines, capacitors, transmitters. You see the same thing with solar. Solar is a great idea. Solar has a lot of room to go in terms of efficiency. The efficiency improvements are still only around the level of cars, and that's due to the source of the energy, as it's a wide dispersion radiation versus, say, like the windmill, which would allow it to have a concentrated, and then that leads us to the two other larger alternatives, which are hydrogen, which is a proven winner. It took us to the moon, gets us into space on a regular basis. Elon Musk will not use it to get to Mars. He prefers methane, and that's because of payload capacity requirements and return delivery, and the production of a methane as opposed to a hydrogen, which would not be available on Mars. But if you're looking at hydrogen, the areas that would likely be the most significant beneficiaries would be the large scale or heavy transport. So shipping could be hydrogen, hydrogen powered. Airplanes, obviously, hydrogen powered. And there is an idea that there would be vehicles. These will probably be trucks, lorries, because of the need for safety and the need for the payload. At this point, fuel cells have not proven to be so significantly beneficial that they could be employed. And the storage capacity requirements for the hydrogen and hydrogen fueling will need to have a further development on a grid. And speaking of grids, you have the issue with the windmills, and the best example is to look at is, of course, in Sweden, we have a large energy wind, and we are looking at carbon taxes, and but we do have a strong nuclear component still, and that will probably come back, but we can get into that in a second. And whereas in Germany, they shut down their nuclears. France may be transitioning out. The UK is a strong user of nuclear, and we even see it coming in the private sector with Rolls-Royce. So it's a wonder on, or a question on, when will other companies come into line. But what we've also seen is the Nord Sea pipeline from Russia, which is strategically a counter move to what had been before. So Germany will become reliant upon the Nord Sea completion. The Ukraine will financially suffer, as will countries like Slovakia, because of their pipelines into Europe. And the Russian gas price will be what rules. And this will be a significant boost or shot in the arm for Putin's economy. And we will see how that plays out. He's already making his moves. He's already demonstrating what he will be doing. There was the forced airline landing this weekend in Belarus of an airplane from Ryanair, which contained a quote-unquote journalist who has been critical of the different administrations, both Timoshenko and Putin. And he was forced to land. It was a flight routed to Latvia that flew over Belarus airspace, and he was taken off the plane as a terrorist. So, well, this goes with the idea that words are war. So, as opposed to really economics are war, or the current warfare. But the idea is that Putin will continue to aggravate and act similar in a way to the way North Korea used to act with their missile launches over into Japan or over towards Japan. and behaving in a way that would benefit the Chinese government. Putin is now off the leash. He has made severe statements about assets and kicking in teeth, which is an interesting statement. He's wished the health to Biden, and the North Sea is an interesting scenario, or the scenario being played out, because you did see a Russian hack onto U.S. Pipeline, the largest on the East Coast, and effectively being shut down for a number of days and disrupting the flow in the U.S. of gasoline and commuter transport. And now you see the North Sea development. The sanctions were lifted by the Biden administration, and this is working in concert with the European Council or governments. And this will be ongoing, and a delivery system into Germany for their power, which then again goes back to the whole idea: if Germany is decarbonizing, why would they be taking in gas? And the issue comes down to this whole energy wind and the windmills efficiencies and or deficiencies, and then again we can get into the debate on subsidies and what the windmills are actually good for. But I think the strong component to the windmill factories, or the windmill fields, and I should say power factories, is that the land, the real estate that's been allocated for these windmills will be used for other renewable or alternative sources of energy. So if you were to look at investments in that space, I would say look at the fields, and not so much at the producers. The producers will continue to show a short-term bounce, and short-term, that could be 3 to 5 years. But at some point, the economics are going to catch up, and the efficiency or the economics of the windmills is not going to be seen as a viable candidate, but it will be something that will be used. It'll go much like how coal has gone, but on an accelerated rate. So the two components for the alternatives that come out as the strongest, biogas is of course being discussed, but the two real components are the hydrogen and the nuclear. Nuclear and small modular, which is being developed in the United States, and also the latest entrant has been Rolls-Royce last week discussing small modular, and we'll see how long it takes before Europe starts to develop into this, because this is a carbon-free product. And the life cycle of these plants can be 60 years. And you need roughly 20 years on the current nuclear plant to achieve a profitability. And then you really start to make the money. With small modular components, you'll see a faster rate. So the small modular will factor in. But the key here is that both the hydrogen and the delivery of the hydrogen, even if it's going into the larger transports like the airplanes, the ships, the rails, will take some time. It's going to take between 5 and 8 years. We do see a lot of very strong product development, but this is a key component to the EU in reducing emissions and achieving a lower carbon rate. And as hydrogen is labeled as carbon-free and renewable and easily used, this will become a much stronger in focus, especially when you have the key families and key industries investing heavily into this. So this is a future component that is still underutilized in the United States, and I say underutilized, but it's a question of the technology. You do have a lot of technology already in place that's using these similar developments, like Alinda, where the capture and conversion and storage are well known. So the technology is not abstract where you need to reinvent. There could be reinvention, of course, but this is not something that's needed at this point. So moving forward, the EU keeps its goals of ESG and environmental, moves forward with a vaccination process where we're looking at roughly 100 million in Europe, hopefully, and we're entering into summer, which is the big tourism season, which is a large boost for economies like Spain, France, even Germany, Netherlands, Sweden. We get a lot here in July. And last year we showed a strong benefit as a result of our COVID policies and lack of lockdown. So what we are looking at is a slowed inflation approach in terms of the reopening, because if you have vaccine passports and you're not vaccinated to the fullest degree, and you've been vaccinated with the wrong vaccine, either from China or from Russia, those are no good. You need to have a European approved, and this will work for even countries like the UK, which recently left the EU and is now in a kind of special category and open for negotiations and readjustment on a number of different things. But this is what's moving forward, and we will not see so much of the inflationary fears achieving as we had. And what's important about this is that we see that the fiat currency model and how to govern it, and in terms of inflation, is well employed. We have Christine Lagarde in the ECB. Her former colleague, Mario Draghi, is running one of the largest European economies in Italy, and he's the king of fiat. And then you have Angela Merkel, who has very well adapted to the fiat currency style. So at this point, I would look at a slower growth, but continued growth in Europe. And as the reopening occurs, we'll see a better valuation coming. And we should still see continued strong growth in the industrials. I'll come back to you on some more, but that's it for right now. Thank you very much.